past experiences as what we called them escorts at the time, and that has become different meaning in some ways. So now I call myself a tour manager and a tour operator. So an operator puts the trips together, and then I actually manage, go out with the group. And in fact, I have two lovely people right here who are former travelers of mine. Was it last year that you went to Colorado with me? All right, we did a big trip out to Colorado on train, and then around the state of Colorado, and then back home. And that was in September of last year. Typical of the trips that I do, Chicago down to Quincy, where Amtrak ends its service, and then we take a motor coach over to Hannibal. They have, I loved Mark Twain when I was teaching. So that was almost the first trip that I did. Subsequent to that, I've done St. Louis, Kansas City, and of course another one of my favorites is the Twin Cities, St. Paul, Minneapolis. Unfortunately, it's not on this line. Amtrak chose the Milwaukee line between Chicago and Milwaukee, coming over to La Crosse, Wisconsin, and then up the river on the west side. Their Hiawatha's were in big competition with our Zephyrs. But we had, statistics will show that, and especially between Chicago and then La Crosse, Winona, St. Paul, Minneapolis, we had the lion's share of the business. So, even though Milwaukee was still is a bigger population. So, all right, that's a little background on me. Some of it will come in, as I say, when we go to other pages here. I put these two gentlemen up here for you, again, as a teaching point. We're kind of in a thank you mode at this moment. I so thank Chris, and he's not here today, but Roger King, and all the other fellas and ladies who have, let's say, signed on to this idea of Silver View coming here for all of us to enjoy. So I've given thanks there, but I want your mind to go back to this fellow named Ralph Budd. And Ralph was always an innovator. By the way, he started with Burlington route way back in his early teen years as some kind of a clerk, if you will, and then of course ascended to become president of Burlington route. Well, he was, as I said, always an innovator, and at that time was the Depression, and all railroads were, people just didn't have the money to ride the trains. If you rode a train, it was like a hobo on the top of a boxcar. So they were looking for ways to economize in any way they could and still retain their passenger and even not go broke. And by the way, Burlington is the only railroad that has never gone bankrupt. They've always paid their dues, whatever the case may be. So that's a monumental thing as far as railroading goes, because a lot of railroads, even today, they can struggle because they don't have the kind of management that they should. So Ralph collaborated with a fellow in Philadelphia by the last name Budd, no relation. His name was Edward Budd, and at that time, that company was into making cars. And they had just developed a way of putting things together called shot welding. That's about the most I can explain. It's a very hard and fast way to attach one piece of metal to another, but it doesn't show the screw marks and all that other kind of stuff. So, and keep in mind that Silver View was shot welded back in 1947 when it started to be manufactured. And it's still held together just fine. So, and there are a lot of cars like Silverview out there made by the company that are still together and doing fine. All right. You can see this train called the Pioneer Zephyr at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Can you raise your hands that any of you have ever seen the Pioneer Zephyr? Yay! Oh, good. Thank you. Great. And they've done some wonderful things to enhance it. It's like a destination in itself to see what's going on at the Pioneer Zephyr. Well, long about 1949, Ralph decides that he's going to move onward. But before he did that, after World War II, 1945, he got together with two other railroads, the Rio Grande, Denver and Rio Grande, and the Western Pacific, which the three railroads handled what's now known as the California Zephyr. But our Silverview out here was more or less the grandmother or the mother of those cars being built. And you'll see some pictures in here that all of the Zephyr equipment was delivered in 1947 to the Burlington. And then the California Zephyr came along in 1949. California Zephyr, probably one of the most renowned trains in the country, if not the world, at that time. Amtrak still has most of that particular route. They retain the name California Zephyr. I'm being very biased. It's a shadow of what our California Zephyr was like. So, in '49, he handed over the reins to this wonderful guy named Harry Murphy. And Harry Murphy was the kind of lover of rail passenger service. Zephyrs had already been introduced. We had the second set of Twin City Zephyrs, which also we had a picture. Yeah. And that was just going gangbusters. And in fact, they would have to add, it was a single, one car shared the wheels of another car. And it's what's called articulation. And that was running through here every day as the morning Zephyr each way. And then it would go up to St. Paul, turn around, and come back as the evening Zephyr, the afternoon Zephyr. We called it the afternoon Zephyr, but by the time it got here at 9 o'clock at night, it was the evening Zephyr. Okay. So, Harry was also a steam engine guy. And if some of you are old enough to remember, Burlington had special steam excursions. The most prominent was called 5632, and that was the bigger of the two. And then the other one, the 4960, that made it actually, the first 5632 was scrapped. That's a whole nother story. But the 4960 is still alive and actually burning vegetable oil now out in the Grand Canyon area. It's called the Grand Canyon Railroad. So they obviously geared that particular engine up with vegetable oil to be green. So, all right. So I'm really indebted to these guys, as we should be, because without their vision and without their tenacity to make sure that they provided the best rail passenger service you could ever do. And Burlington was renowned for many, many years as being one of, or if not the best. There are other competitors like Union Pacific and Santa Fe and all the rest of it. We held our esteem with the rest of the country. All right, now I hope I don't screw this up. Here, the top picture is the Pioneer Zephyr and the next 4 trains that looked like the Pioneer Zephyr. They were very small. They only had probably 60 coach seats and maybe 12 to 15 parlor car or first class seats in the very back. They didn't even have a dining car. They just had a dinette where you'd walk up, buy your sandwich, go back to your seat and have it. God, I'm like Amtrak this today. Anyway, these were taken in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, which I'll show you some pictures in just a moment. But Prairie du Chien is very near and dear to me. I'll explain that a little bit. And then Burlington recognized that their little trains, and they were called the Twin Zephyrs, they just couldn't handle the market demand. So let's build a bigger one. And then if you can, some of the shadowing is, this is a 7-car train. And now you have at least 3 coaches, so you've got 160 people on for coach seating. And then they had actually 2 parlor cars in the back, the very rear and then one right before that. And then they had their wonderful dining car service. Burlington was always well known for its excellent meals in their dining department. So, all right. Which, if you fast forward to 1936 and then to 1950, little Michael Abernathy would have been standing on these very platforms. Okay. In 1947, and I just love this picture because, number one, it's got my silver view, but over on the side, there's the depot. There's what we're sitting in right now. Okay. Yep. And this is what I call the perfect Zephyr, because as it was advertised when it first came out, which would have been December 18th of 1947. I was a mere baby at the time. I had been born in March of that year. And I also liken Silverview and I are born the same year. Okay, 1947. Okay. And we had, again, the picture's a little fuzzy back here, but you had your motors, and there's a gentleman here in the room named Maury who said to me, Michael, if you're going to be at Burlington, you call the power, you call it motors, okay? How many of you knew that? That you should be, okay, very good. Yeah. Yeah. And then you had your buffet car, which you'll see later on. 4 coach cars, each of them could hold 50 people. Then your wonderful diner, and then of course your Silverview. And if you look closely, not now, but in the picture, you'll see Silverview on the side. So this was probably taken in the early 50s. So, yep. And this is the morning Zephyr that made it stop here around 9:30ish, and then got up to St. Paul, turned around, and came back that night, just like the early ones did. I showed these because I do like little depots. They're fun. And the top one, Postville, Iowa, as I said, is about 25 miles away from Prairie du Chien. And that's the depot that we had, and it's the Milwaukee Road that ran through. We only had a nighttime train, and I'm talking night, 2 o'clock in the morning. All right. So there was the depot, and just down the way a little bit and across the tracks was this very nice Victorian house. It was a 2-flat, so to speak, and we lived on the upstairs floor. And I think this is where the railroad bug might have bit me, because I was told by my parents that at 2 o'clock in the morning, when somehow or another I knew that the passenger train was coming through, that I would be standing at the window with my teddy bear and watch what you do. Corny, but there you are. So, Prairie du Chien, as I said, is 25 miles east and just across the river. That picture holds a lot of memories just for me. This is about where you would come down Main Street in Prairie du Chien, turn, and then if you were boarding the train, you would park your car here, whoever was taking you to the train. And then you cross, did you have these cross, they were made of wood, where the passengers could walk across to get to that platform? Okay, and then of course go in, get your ticket, come back out, and you're ready for wait for the Zephyr. That building still exists today, but BNSF is really not taking care of it. Thank goodness you folks rescued this, because while this isn't no stellar piece of architecture, it still was very, very comfortable and so forth and a place to board the train. All right. Here is, again, the Prairie du Chien Depot, and this was probably taken in the late 50s, and you would be looking northward towards St. Paul, toward La Crosse, then St. Paul, Minneapolis. And I hope you can really see this, but I just on eBay, probably about a month ago, I always check eBay Burlington to see what's available. And I don't know these people at all, but I do know that's the Silverview. Most likely Silverview was always on the morning Zephyr going up and the evening train coming back. So again, this holds a tremendous memory for me, because I would always, after the train was going down the track toward La Crosse and St. Paul, I would stand there, and we've got a temporary sign out there that says Twin City Zephyr. I still have in hand at my house back in St. Charles, a neon sign. And I'll brag about it. It costs $1,300. But it's a replica of what would have been inside right there. Okay, so there we go. And I would watch and watch and watch. It get fade, and then of course my fun was over. I had to go back to reality. This is the confluence of the Wisconsin River, and there's the Mississippi. You've got Wisconsin here and Iowa on the other side. This area is known as Wyalusing State Park. Anybody ever been there? No, good, excellent. The fun is, or when I was a kid, we used to, on Sundays, not everyone, but we would go down to Prairie du Chien, get supplies, and then go up to the park. And then the pavilion for cooking food and everything like that was just up the path this way. So you'd find little Mikey standing somewhere here and always watching for the Zephyr, or freight trains, but for the Zephyr for sure. You can still go there today. It's just a lovely, lovely place. State operated. Wisconsin has wonderful state parks and so forth. When I was not near Prairie du Chien and near my Zephyrs, I would always, they had a rack of postcards, and this is called the Scenic Line brochure, which told everything about little communities. Oregon is in there, by the way, and the population at that time and so forth. And again, at the very back page, and you'll notice, well, you can't, it's fuzzy. It says Silverview here. And I would sit way too many hours just looking at that picture. And this is how bad it gets, folks. So, and this was my general idea of what the Zephyr should always look like. And most of the time it did up until about the 60s and so forth. But this is just not too far from St. Paul, a place called St. Croix Tower for any of you railroaders that know the Burlington. And they're probably about 15, 20 minutes away from St. Paul Union Station at this point. So, we moved from Iowa to Elgin, Illinois in 1961. And my parents had, I hope I'm being PC enough here. My parents had a wider view of the world. And they had both been to Chicago many times. In fact, they honeymooned at the Edgewater Beach in Chicago, Grand Hotel on the north side. And then my grandmother had eye issues, detached retina, and was a specialist in Chicago. And that's what got us to use this line a lot. Usually right in October, November. And then for a summer vacation, we'd go into Chicago, stay at the Edgewater Beach, and then of course go to the Cub games. So, but this is Aurora, and unfortunately this beautiful building, these were called Burlington boxes, because notice how they are very much a box rectangle. And up over here, there was the platforms and so forth. Aurora was basically the birthplace of the Burlington realm. And then of course they had divisional offices up on the second floor. Your waiting room was down here. And at that time, still plenty of parking. Those of you who know cars, I don't know what make and model these are. Anybody know? Anyway, from just by looking, so the closest one?
Yeah.
Ford Fairlane, all right. What year do you think?
Late 60s.
Okay, all right, good, yeah. When Amtrak took over and they neglected the building because they moved the passenger stop to Naperville. They just really neglected the building. I was having the fantasy of trying to buy it or get a bunch of people to chip in, and then we would make a restaurant or whatever out of it. Well, we had some serious snowfalls, probably about between 5 and 10 years ago now, and it got too heavy for the roof, and the whole thing just collapsed. So it's gone. I have a couple of bricks from it. So, all right. Now, what I want you to do is kind of imagine, I'm going to take a ride on the Zephyr. And what are some of the behind the scenes that happen to make the Zephyr so great? And I show these pictures first because in the yard, you had your staff that would, honest to God, meticulously clean each car. We were known for cleanliness and so on and so forth. And there you can see these gals. I know for a fact that this is a California Zephyr car, just because. These gals, you can see that these ashtrays, you could still smoke in any place on the train, which is a real pain. And so to clean them, they would first of all bring these ashtrays down. They'd have something underneath that all the ashes and cigarette butts would be there. And then of course, take it away. Then they do the vacuuming, and notice this gal polishing up the handrails for the steps going up to the dump. Okay. Is that your, okay, that sounds like me. We were also known for exterior cleanliness. There's such a wonderful thing with the stainless steel that Silverview and the rest of the cars are made out of, that they would run not too far away from the yard. They would run it through the washer, and that was called the Morgan Street washer. And you could see, obviously, there's E5, which is, in my opinion, the prettiest motor that ever lived. And then, of course, they designed brushes that would clean the dome. So at least when we started out, we were all nice and spotless, so to speak. Notice this fella is just sweeping out the steps just to make sure that it makes a nice presentation. Okay. What about when people want to eat on the train? Well, you got to have a commissary. This is obviously canned goods and so forth, and then they even had a butcher department that the steward would decide, okay, by the way, Twin Zephyrs didn't have reservations for coach. You did have to reserve your first class though. So he'd make a judgment based on time of the year and so forth. How many steaks, how many fish. Usually the fish were loaded up in St. Paul, or I should say Minneapolis, because they had walleye on the menu a lot, or something as good as that. Then, now these guys look like they're just sitting doing nothing. Well, all of these believe me, I've done this with my own trips, because I wanted to extend a little bit of the Burlington experience to my trips. But you've got to put the tablecloth down. You've got to place the plates and the silverware in the right spot. You got to fill the sugar bowls, blah, 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 blah. So these guys were already, I would call it, cashed out by, if the train left at 8 o'clock, they'd be sitting here waiting to be what we call shoved back into Union Station. And they would just have a little bit of breather, because by the time the passengers started boarding, people would filter in to have breakfast. There'd be maybe about a half an hour downtime for them to do maybe one of these deals. And by the way, this fella is one of the chefs back there. You can see his chef's hat. And then here's my favorite of all the pictures here. This fella has a stack of napkins, and Burlington had a special way of folding the napkins. And Mr. Goofy, when I have my train tours, that's the way I want my napkins. To be that guy doing it right there. So, incidentally, these were probably taken. The dining for Twin Zephyr diners were delivered in early January of 48, and they must not have had the curtains, because all of the dining cars had curtains. And I noticed that when I saw these pictures, that they didn't have that. All right, a little bit about Union Station. That's always been, to me, a big deal. It's tons of memories, because when I worked for Burlington, I was in Union Station. If you talk about the main concourse, I don't mean that. This is called the Great Hall. And a lot of people would, if they had a long period of time between trains, they would go into the Great Hall. And all around the perimeter here are the offices for the various railroads. And our reservation center was on the 3rd floor. I'm sure that there are at least 2 floors going on here. Okay. So when I first worked for Burlington, I commuted from Elgin, and we didn't have that many commuter trains at that time. I started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and got off at midnight. And I also had, not so bad now, but hay fever. And I take my medication, barely get off the commuter train, go into the main hall, and then have a nap on one of these benches. This is a 1940s, probably just after World War II ended. The information desk was right here, and then if you went through this archway, so to speak, that would take you into the waiting room in the Great Hall. And you can see that it was just so wonderful a plan that even the commuters, and there were still a lot of them back then, not as many as now, but the point is that it was a nice flow of people in and out of the building. Right? In 1969, which was my last year of working for Burlington, they sold what was called the air rights, and today, where the concourse was, it's above that, probably 30, 40-story high-rise buildings. What they did, again, wrong was there are all kinds of pillars and everything all around this area now. So you have to, if you're in Union Station at any time in the future, remember that I told you that the design is terrible. And especially if they have switching, and I'm talking about the switches out on the tracks, and they have that, then all of a sudden these commuters of today have to find some place to stand and wait for the train. So it's just a mess when that happens. So, all right. As the concourse that I showed you, this was what everybody up until 1969 remembered. And I know that it's pretty dark right here, but you can see people lining up here for the morning Zephyr. And the reason I know that is because you see this stainless steel sign with the word Zephyr on it? Okay, that was there as an advertising gimmick and everything to say, okay folks, you're gonna ride the Zephyr and here's the gate that you're gonna go through. I love this picture because if it was the morning Zephyr and Silverview was on the train, that's what you first would see. And there's that neon sign that I told you about. I'll let it go. Okay. As you walked ahead, there's like an incline, and you walk down there, and of course the doorway to Silverview would be, of course, open with a porter standing there greeting you. And then this was taken in 1948. Burlington Advertising Department got a gentleman, I don't know his name, but they had him go out for several weeks and just take candid shots of the Zephyrs and people who were on the train. Okay, so this was probably somewhere, I'm guessing, between Chicago and Oregon. And these folks had settled into their first class seats. You can see the newspapers and so forth. And then that's in the rear end of the car. In the front end, we won't see it today, but in the future, there's a wonderful mural that shows the route of the Twin Zephyrs. Oregon is on here, by the way. And a wonderful, I'll call it just a mark in time where Zephyrs would run through fields and farm. And you've got a Holstein cow in the barn, and the husband and wife, and so on and so forth. So that was first class. Here was the dining car that was just ahead. And again, one of my favorite pictures is the steward beckoning you, because it was used as an advertising picture, beckoning you to come sit down that lady reminds me in some ways or another of my mother, because my mother had a hat. Like that. All right. I kind of wonder if this is the same lady right here. But the point is that here is breakfast, and notice this gentleman reading his paper. And, the waiters would always stand. It's pretty hard for them to disappear. So they'd be watching what was going on. Were you done with your course or whatever it was that you were eating? And man would be right there just to take it away. So on and so forth. This is almost my favorite picture. My grandma, who by the way, left me money so that I could buy Silverview. Yep. Yeah. And here you have a grandma and a little girl, and they're having lunch in the diner. And if you get a chance, we're going to try and put these on display somewhere. Not today, but sometime when you get a chance to look at them. I can't decide whether this little girl has a hot dog or what kind of sandwich she's got. But again, the typical way of how they cut their sandwiches, in triangles, all that stuff. And again, being the tour operator that I am, I tried to do some of that with our meals that we had. Yeah. All right. If you had to ride coach, which we did most of the time, the coaches were just like riding first class. 2 seats on each side. You see the mural back there, which I showed you the picture of where the Wisconsin River empties into the Mississippi. Okay? And long about 1773, 2 guys by the name of Marquette and Joliet, Illinois City is named after him now, Joliet. But they, quote, discovered how you could get on the Wisconsin River and then get over to the Mississippi, which is a major thoroughfare in the United States back then. So, again, another favorite picture. See this little gal sitting here? Well behaved, because I can remember all of us little kids were pretty savvy, behaved kids. And it's just a way of, okay, she found a place to light for a little bit. This probably was her relatives, either grandma or mom, and so on and so forth. And again, if you bring yourself down, there's a little boy that's looking out the window there. Now, normally, when I got on Zephyr, it was like a hot shot right up to the dome. Gotta have a seat in the dome. But my parents would generally have this seating area. Somewhere or another was usually available. But that reminds me of looking out the window on the main floor. I put this here because it's the Vista Dome views. This was a publicity that, what I want to say, used in a lot of newspapers, magazines, and so forth. And notice this brings us up to what, 1960, and this has got to be someplace north of La Crosse. I've never been able to pinpoint it. But this is what your Vista Dome views would be like. How many of you have ridden the Zephyr and been up in a Vista Dome? Raise your hand. Thank you. Good memories, good memories. And then I also love this because it's called Lake Pepin. The train curves around like this, goes past a place called Maiden Rock, and then right over here is Point No Point. And when you're on this side and you go around, all of a sudden the point disappears. And then when you get farther down the track, the point comes back again. It's just all a visual type thing. That's just a beautiful area. Amtrak actually goes along the west side now over there. Here was the club car. Um, This car happened to be Silver Salon, and notice this is probably around 11 or 12. Schlitz was the beer of choice for my parents, so I see some Schlitz bottles in there. This is the cover for the menu for the club car. And then I also love this guy because he's having his lunch. And you can see he's got a glass of milk, he has a sandwich. This is a little mustard pot. So he probably had some kind of ham, cheese, or whatever they want to say. So, all right. Now, I'm kind of making you move fast forward because you probably wonder, what the hell have you been doing for 20 years, Mike, that you can't get this car back in shape and as part of your operations, the trips. Amtrak decided to use the expression mod up, mod meaning make it modern. And I thought that I had put some pictures in here of how garish it was. It was awful. Their main thing about trying to, I hope you're feeling how you hear me now. They probably thought that A, Amtrak wouldn't succeed, and B, these cars are already old, meaning 40 years. And so we'll just cover up anything that looks bad. Carpeting and glue were their major ways of doing all that. When I got Silverview, and I know you folks up here can tell, they had carpet, but then when I pulled the carpet off, the glue was still stuck to the side of the car. So this was in a hot late October week. And I went up there to Charles City, Iowa, where the car was. And in that period of time, probably 5 days, I went all the way around, and you can see the final outcome is over here. And this is a more close-up version of what that is. And then, where's the hole? In the center right there of the aisle. This was called a heart. And it had speakers. So you could actually tune into a radio station, or they had recorded music as well. And then that would be the speaker for the people who don't. Well, they became collector's items, and somebody that I knew had gotten a hold of one, and of course I had to have those. So the guy next door to me at the time, he said, I can do that. So next time we're together, I'll show you the harp that he made. And that's it right there. So, beautiful piece of work. I think that's it, as far as the pictures are concerned. It takes a lot of money to bring Silverview back to what you saw today here, that the Burlington was able to do. And by the way, Silverview, when it was made, cost the Burlington $165,000 back then. Now that probably was a lot of money. Was it a lot of money back then? Okay. And each car subsequent, a little lower, depending on whether it was a dome or so forth. But that's been the major problem that I've had in the last 20 years of ownership. And hopefully we'll find ways here in Oregon to find some monies. And I'm not begging at this moment, but it's going to be necessary if we're going to achieve what you saw here. So we'll be getting together other times in the future here. You've been a wonderful audience, my goodness, you're so authentic. And again, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, especially the people who are on the board, or still on the board for the Oregon Deeply Museum, and your local, your area enthusiasm. This shows something that's going on here that you're liking. So we hope that we can keep it moving forward. With that, I've got just a couple minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? So, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just curious as to how far into the late 1960s the Silverview was part of the census.
Okay.
The other thing, just incidentally, I grew up about a half mile west of the Florida Beach.
Oh, great. So you got to see this a lot. Okay. I'm still going to try to be PC, but when Harry Murphy, remember the picture I showed him, when he came to Burlington, and what I think is odd is the Burlington people chose him. He had already gotten rid of all of the passenger service on what was known as the Frisco line. So, and this is sort of a long way of explaining your question. I went to school in Dayton, Ohio, and when we had spring break, I would come home and go down to the offices at the Burlington in Chicago, and I would ask, do you still want me to work? Oh, yeah. Okay. So, but people I knew there said, you can't believe what's going on. What do you mean? Well, Mink, and he had it. The Burlington people at that time, especially in the passenger department, would call him Mink the Fink. And so Mink the Fink pulled off all of the parlor cars, including Silverview, and the diners, the Twin Zephyrs and other, I'll call them not long distance trains. The Denver Zephyr, California, Empire Builder that came through here, Northwest Limited, they still retained their diners. But that happened in 1968. Then Silverview and other cars like it, its twin sister Silver Vista, they were used as coach cars. And one of my jobs at Burlington, the first month, was to escort groups, managed groups from Chicago out to Galena and Dubuque. And we had Silverview several times as just a plain old coach car handling excursion people. So, does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay, good. You're welcome.
Didn't Amtrak use it in regular service in the 70s? Why was it finally retired?
That's a good, really good. In order for the railroads to get rid of their service, or as much as they wanted to, in May of '71, they had to contribute whatever cars were deemed usable, workable, and they were given over to Amtrak ownership, right? So Silverview was one of them. And I have very few, but I have some pictures of Silverview in what's called Amtrak colors. Livery is another word for it. There went what I call the identification of the Burlington. And it lasted for about 1977, okay? And then it was put on what they called an auction, and the car was picked up by a company out in New York called the Susquehanna. And that's actually who I bought it from. Susquehanna was in the Syracuse, Cooperstown area. Baseball people would know Cooperstown. So, how's that for an answer? Okay, sir?
When was the last train through?
All service through here, let's say scheduled service, was April 30th of 1971. The next day, May 1st, that's when Amtrak took over and we lost the service here. They had a couple of trains come through from the west, Empire Building Northwest Limited. I think May the 2nd was truly the last train to stop here, going east-west to Chicago, but nothing's coming this way, nothing going west. No. Maury?
Not a question, just an observation. I am Maury Godsell, board chairman of the Guilford Railroad Museum. And I just wanted to express our jealousy, because there was a time in the past when we were brainstorming and scheming to bring Scenic View to Guilford. But I just, being here the first time and seeing here, and the wonderful job, incredible effort and dedication that you people have put into bringing that car here, I want to extend our absolute admiration and congratulations to you all.
Sir, right behind Maury. Go ahead.
My company's called BNSF, so when did they combine, the BN and Santa Fe combine?
The merger, that one, I can't tell
The
you.
merger.
Maury, do you know that?
1995.
95. The true BN merger between Burlington, Great Northern Pacific, Spokane, Portland, Seattle, that merger happened on May 2nd of 1970. So we lost the name Burlington Route, but they still, because of the popularity of Burlington, they chose to call it Burlington
It's
Northern.
called BNSF now, right?
And now it's BNSF after 1995, you said? 95, okay. How about some others? No? Yes, ma'am.
I remember riding the train from here to Chicago and such. And I know sometimes it was the Zephyr, but they also had what we call the milk train. And I was wondering what were the milk trains that would be, they would stop at all the other little burns and definitely were not the Zephyr. What were milk trains?
The whole purpose is, by calling it the milk train, they picked up milk from the farmers. But it's still it's called the ICC, Interstate Commerce Commission. If you were a railroad and you said, we're not getting passengers on and off the train at your town, so we want to discontinue the passenger service, we'll stop and pick up the milk somewhere or another. But that's really, I hope I'm answering your question.
Well, I know we would get on a train, you know, like I say, I remember riding the Zephyr, but, we would have, I'm just throwing out numbers here, I don't know exactly, but like the Zephyr was to go west, we had to be here at a certain time.
That's right.
But if we missed that, then an hour and a half later, or maybe 3 hours later, we could get on one of these milk trains.
Right, oh yes.
And so were they like a combination of passenger and freight, or what?
A lot of freight baggage cars were in front, and you might have one or two coaches. They probably could only fill up one.
And then on the other end in Chicago, coming out, oh my, we missed the Zephyr, we gotta get, go to.
That train that left about 10:30 was called the Blackhawk, named after Chief Blackhawk.
Yeah, okay, I remember
Yep.
that, but I was preteen. I'll tell
Good,
you that.
very good, well, good memory on that. Long and short of it, yeah, because the Zephyr left at 4:15 out of Chicago, and the Blackhawk 1030. So you had quite a wait if you missed the Chevrolet. Yeah. Sir?
Yeah, this is my hometown, so, I remember taking my mom right to Chicago many times, but how come to make Oregon a stop, because it's a small, it was such a small town then? Was it because the number of passengers got off on
I
it?
would think, as much as anything, Governor Loudon and his family, are connected to that. He had very Pullman, add those two up together, and that was a strong reason.
They actually was in the marriage contract that the train stopped here.
Was it really?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
No, come on.
It was in the contract.
No.
We'll talk about that later today.
Another quick answer to that is, Oregon is a county seat, and a lot of your county seat area provided 1 ton of passengers to get on trains. And we're only, how far is Rockford up there? 30 miles. 30 miles. So it was a way for Rockford area people to come down here and then get a really good fast train to get up north to the Twin Cities or even west to Seattle and Portland. So,
And all the servicemen that went into World War II would meet here, in Chicago, physicals, and departures as well.
And after, I lived here for,
You did as well.
oh my God, thank you for your service. Is that it? Okay, go back to you. What, yes, ma'am.
I grew up in Burlington, Iowa, and I remember when they built this modern looking depot there.
Yes.
Not just for trains, but after a day, we always go there for late night coffee or something.
At Greer's, they call it. Greer's coffee shop. Where-
And the shops were in Burlington.
Sure.
Westbrook.
Westbrook, you're right.
And I remember they were trying to get transportation to the how is that going?
All I can say is that it's typical Amtrak and the railroad that it would run over, called the Canadian National. They don't want it. It's a pain in the rear end. That's how they perceive it. And naturally, I would love to see the train come through here, but there are so many. I think somebody said 35 trains.
There's
a day.
33, 4, 5 trains a day that go through here. Chris Myers, my namesake, has a real and Mike's twin, not identical twin, born the same year, they both about 6'3", but they both happen to be rail buffs, rail freaks.
Freaks.
Bill Talent. Bill, can you give us a number? Is that the correct number?
I'd say that's pretty
All
close.
right.
Okay.
Back.
One last one, sir. Oh,
one reason that the Burlington probably made Oregon a stop goes back to steam age, when between Aurora and Savannah, they needed a place to stop
Good
for
point.
water.
you bet. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Sir?
I just wanted to ask what different services and functions will Silverview be thinking about doing in the future as you finish your restoration?
Okay. We're in the talking stages of periodically, I'm big on dining car service. So I've got the whole recipe book from the Burlington and also the menus. And they usually offer for dinner time beef, fish, pork, chicken. So we would have, let's say we would advertise, okay, thus and so October 10th we'll have a dinner. And we can't have it on Silverview right now, but maybe here or something of the sort. The point is, that it'll be Burlington, I call them Burlington meals. So, things like that. So,
Mike will be around for questions for quite a while afterwards. We could probably get outside and kick the tires if you'd like to try it.
yeah.
I'd like to also thank the City of Oregon and Mayor Williams. They actually the city bought the depot, and they still own it. But the Eagle Museum, folks, we are the board that kind of runs the operation and see that things are done and give the rail car in. Thank the city of Oregon for their support and everything you've done. We're waiting. Snap this picture Monday night this week, put it in the doctor, you know. The Oregon paper this week, we probably have to run a special edition, but it was 3 or 4 pages of the silver review, the story behind it. Erlene Hinton spent several days down here following the car, interviewed Mike, Roger Kane, and did a lot of things. I don't know how to get all this together. And thanks again for the Galesburg folks here today and your testimony. Pretty powerful. I apologize to all of you that had to stand. We knew we probably needed a bigger venue, but we still thought it was proper that this meeting had the people and the facility to do a special. So thanks again for your perseverance, and we look forward to your support as we move forward.
If you want to just take a little tour of me, I can't take you inside Silverview because it's just not ready. But I can take you around and give you a couple little tidbits on this and that and the other. If you just assemble right out here, and I'll start out in about 5 minutes. Right, yeah, the escort, yeah. Thanks again, folks, for your attention and kindness.
Mike McPherson.
35 grades for this. So, long and short. No, let's see the next I have to know. If you have any, it's other than. If you find out, you'll Colorado. If you find out, let me know that we have. Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, I think he was shot at the beginning, but I haven't told him he was the one that did it.
Fellow behind us was looking like he was going to pass.
Gotcha.
I was with you, and then I was like, oh, this guy's not going to make it standing here.